Hi, and welcome to Nevaeh's Nightmare. And on this episode, we're going to be talking about the Cottingley Fairy photos. In the British Isles, there is a long tradition of beings that live beside humans and apart from them. These beings are known as the Fae in British and Irish folklore, but they are also known to us in the modern world as fairies. Fairies are often thought to be elusive creatures that no one can ever provide a definite proof of, but in 1917, however, two English girls shocked the world by claiming that they had not only seen fairies, but they had photos of them. This is the story of the Cottingley Fairy photos. In 1917, Frances Griffith, 10, had moved with her mother and father from South Africa to the small West Yorkshire village of Cottingley in the north of England. Once there, she met with her older cousin Elsie Wright, who was 16. The two girls became fast friends and would spend many days exploring around the area of the family home. One of the places they most liked to go to was a small creek that flowed through a small ravine that the local people referred to as Beck. One day, Frances went down to the beck by herself and returned home soaking wet. Her mother was furious about this and became even more furious when Frances explained what had happened. Frances told her mother that she had met some fairies in the beck and started playing with them. While doing so, she fell in the water and the fairies left. Naturally, her mother did not believe this story and punished Frances. Elsie felt sorry for Frances and told her that since her mother didn't believe her, then they should get a camera and take pictures of the fairies. They would prove that fairies were real to their parents, and once they believed the girls, they would confess it was all fake. Elsie went to her father and asked him if she could borrow his camera, which was a Bitcher's Midge box camera. Elsie told him that she just wanted to take a picture of Frances in the woods to remember her by. Elsie copied pictures from a famous children's book of the time called Princess Mary's Gift Book, added wings to the figures, and then used hairpins to attach them to the bushes. Frances then sat behind the figures and posed for the photo. The image then showed Frances sitting still while the fairies formed a ring around her. When the girls returned home, Elsie gave the plate to her father for him to develop. When he developed the picture, he immediately was skeptical that these were real fairies. Indeed, all the members of the family were convinced that the girls were just having some fun, but the two cousins insisted that they had actually taken photos of fairies. 1 month later, Elsie again convinced her father to let her use the camera. He gave her a single photo plate, just like last time, and once again, a strange figure appeared in the picture. The picture was of a kneeling Elsie looking down at a small gnome who was looking up and holding his arms out to her. When he saw the new picture, Mr. Wright was firmly convinced that his daughter was playing a joke on everyone and forbade her from ever using the camera again. A year passed, and Frances moved away from Cottingley to another part of Yorkshire. Before she did, she wrote to a friend in South Africa and included copies of two photos for her friend. Frances stated that Elsie and I are very friendly with the Beck fairies. It is funny, I do not see them in Africa. It must be too hot for them there. Later on, this would be used to prove that the photos were authentic. The photos were all but forgotten about by the family until 1919. In that year, Elsie's mother, Polly, attended a lecture put on by the Theosophical Society. The Theosophical Society had its roots in the spiritualist movement and thus took the existence of spiritual beings, such as fairies, as absolute truth. The lecture she had attended happened to be on fairies and fairy folklore. This made Polly rethink that maybe Frances and Elsie had been telling the truth the entire time. She mentioned the photos to the lecturer and she later sent him the prints. A few months later, the prints were put on display at the Theosophical Society annual conference. They came to the attention of society's head, Edward Gardner. For Gardner, these photos were definite proof of the existence of fairies. Gardner contacted the Wright family and obtained the original plates for them. He sent them to H. Snelling, who was an expert in photography. Snelling determined that these photos were not fake and that the girls indeed were telling the truth. Based on this assessment, Gardner stated to feature the photos at the Theosophical Society's lectures. In attendance at one of these was the writer Arthur Conan Doyle. Author Conan Doyle is best known as the author of Sherlock Holmes. What is less known about him is that he was deeply interested in spiritualism. Doyle had become a spiritualist in the late 19th century, but when the First World War broke out in 1914, he became even more dedicated to the practice. Because of the staggering losses in the battle of many young men, which would eventually include Doyle's own son, he saw being able to contact the dead as a way for the families to gain some sort of peace. Another interest of Doyle's was the spirit photography. He had spent a lot of time debating validity of it in the scientific establishment. When he saw the fairy photos, he immediately saw them of proof of a hidden world. Doyle told Gardner that he should take these plates to the Kodak laboratory in London to get a second opinion. Once again, the experts at the laboratory saw no evidence of the photograph trickery, and this furthered the belief that they were genuine. Gardner then contacted the Wrights and supplied Elsie and Frances a better camera so they could take more photos and pictures of the fairies. This the girls promptly did, and showing three more photos in 1919 and 1920. One showed a side view of Frances with the fairy flying close to her face. The second was of Elsie sitting next to a small fairy that was offering a flower to her. The third featured none of the girls but depicted three fairies in a row, seemingly fading from existence. Doyle then published an article in The Strand magazine in 1919, printing the first two photos, then in March 1920, printing the next three. The articles received worldwide publicity. A lot of the publicity was negative in nature, with many wondering how the respected author of Sherlock Holmes books could be so easily fooled by two teenage girls. The famous magician Harry Houdini, who spent a great deal of time debunking spiritualist claims, even argued that fairies were cutouts from an advertising poster he had seen. The poster was produced, however, and these images on it did not match the photos. Doyle took this as further proof of the fairy photos' authenticity, and he wrote a book about the Cottingley case called The Coming of Fairies in 1922. As time wore on, both Elsie and Frances grew tired of talking and faking fairy photos. The girls were in a real predicament, however. Important people were promoting the photos as absolute truth, and by now, a lot of reputations were at stake. Author Conan Doyle was a highly respected author in the authority at the time, and if the girls confessed, they feared that they could ruin his life. Gardner was also highly respected as well, and in a confession could possibly hurt the Theosophical Society, so the girls felt that they needed to play along. In one incident, Gardner actually came to Cottingley and bringing with him a famous occultist of the time named Geoffrey Hodson. The girls could not produce any pictures as Elsie had no time to fake anything, but Hodson said that he could see the fairies. The girls thought Hodson was a fake, but they played along anyways to humor Gardner. By 1922, any interest in the fairy photographs had died down, and the girls went on with the rest of their lives. Frances and Elsie grew up, found husbands, and had children of their own, and most people forgot about the photographs. Controversy about the photos continued. In 1945, Gardner published a book about the case and reprinted the photos in it. Elsie and Frances, when they would speak about the photos, which wasn't often, would neither confirm nor deny that they were real. In 1972, Elsie would attempt to confess by sending the camera and the plates and other materials to Slothby's, a well known fine art company, with a letter stating that the girls had even made the whole thing up. Slothby's didn't really acknowledge or understand what they had sent, and they sent the letter back. 4 years later, Elsie was interviewed on the BBC and stated that the photos were genuine. Finally, in 1983, after an investigation into the photos done by the British Journal of Photography, both Frances and Elsie confessed that they had made the whole thing up and even demonstrated how they made the fairies. The Cottingley Fairy photos are considered one of the greatest paranormal hoaxes of all time. There is no mystery now as to how the girls did what they did. The real mystery is why they let the hoax continue for nearly 75 years. One explanation is that Frances and Elsie were sensitive to the fact that they were to confess while certain people were still alive, and that would ruin the reputation of those people and possibly their families. Given enough time, those people would pass on and the pictures would fade into memory. As they got older, may have felt the time had come to confess, so they had a clean conscience about it. It seems the girls started it as a practical joke that the family didn't believe, but matters got out of hand when the Theosophical Society and author Doyle got involved. Elsie and Frances got swept into events that got way out of control and eventually had no choice but to continue to produce the photos. Finally, there's another mystery in this case. Why had the girls decided to fake the photos in the first place? Remember that this whole thing started when Frances fell in the creek and came home soaking wet to her mother, who was not happy about it. Frances insisted to her mother that she had seen real fairies, and that's when she and Elsie came up with their hoax. In her confession to the investigator from the photography journal in the 1980s, Frances still insisted that she had seen the fairies. To her dying day, she never wavered from that story, so maybe, just maybe, she was telling the truth all along. Before I close out this video, I just want to let you guys know about the Strange Realities conference that is happening this year. The past couple of years, I have been very, very grateful and have had the honor of helping out, but this year, I'm going to be speaking. So if you want to help me out, want to have a little bit more interest on who I am and the things that I have interest in, feel free to check it out at strangerealitiesconference.com. But if you want to support me and the other people who are speaking, make sure to check it out. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and make sure to let me know down in the comments. Even though this is obviously a hoax, do you think that she actually saw fairies and that's what started all of this? I mean, there's plenty of fae folklore. So just let me know what you think. And don't forget the Strange Realities Conference. It is November 1st and 2nd. Want to continue spooky season after the 31st? Would you like to dive deeper into the world of the paranormal, the occult, cryptozoology, and other unexplainable topics? Then the Strange Realities Conference is the right one for you. Live and online in Nashville, Tennessee, November 1st and 2nd at SIR Nashville, and November 3rd online only. Strange Realities Conference 2024 will feature presentations by Tim Banal, Nathan Isaac, Kendall Lackey, Brent Rains, Micah Hanks, Ren Collier, Joshua Cutchin, Recluse, Nevaeh Terry, and Steve Berg as your Master of Ceremony.